Welcome back. On today's video, I'm talking about my experience with different tax softwares. The obligatory disclaimer, of course, at the front of this video is this is not advice. It's not tax advice. It's not any sort of advice at all. It is simply my experience dealing with different softwares. Let's jump right in then. If you are someone that's able to use the free tax filing software, that would mean you are a W-2'd employee generally. You get a W-2 at the end of the year. Your employer takes your taxes out from your paychecks every single pay period, and you don't have other income. Generally, you're going to be able to use the free tax filing software, and any software is going to be fairly similar. It's very basic. You go in, you plug in the numbers on your W-2, it tells you what you owe, and you're done. Congratulations, that would be phenomenal. However, for anyone else that has gig work, side hustles, income of other sorts, tax or stock trading, crypto trading, and you had gains or losses, if you want to, or if you need to, which most of us will need to report gains or losses throughout the year, you're going to need to most likely pay for an upgrade in the software. So this talks about different features that are available. Unemployment income, Social Security income, always requires upgrades, and I found that this is not always the case, but again, check the tax software that you're going through. If you are writing off, or if you're making charitable contributions and you want to write that off against your income, which yes, you can actually do. If you give money to a charity, it's got to be a licensed, a federally recognized charity, usually a 503c or something along those lines. Your tax software will tell you. You'll need to do that. Itemized deductions, if you have deductions that exceed the federal automatic deduction that they give you for income, which many people do not meet that threshold because it is fairly high, you would need to upgrade. HSA contributions, daycare or other dependent care expenses. So if you go to work and you have to pay a child care professional or a daycare for your children, your software may not allow that if you're using a free version. Stock and cryptocurrencies, dividends, rental income, side hustles, and small business income, as I was talking about, most of these programs are going to require an upgrade. Sometimes there are things that are included on the free tier, and this can be very important, but if it is not included, it may warrant you actually paying for an upgrade. It are things like educational credits. If you pay tuition, not your parents, but you pay tuition, and it comes to you in a form of a 1098-T, I believe, don't quote me on that, then you may need to pay for that, but that gives you a tax credit. Now, the difference between a deduction and a tax credit is a deduction comes off of your income. You get your income reduced, which means you don't pay whatever tax level you're at on that income. So it's a proportional reduction. A tax credit, on the other hand, means that you are actually given a percent of money for application either against your taxes that you owe to the government, or money that you get back even if you didn't pay any money in. Kind of a cool thing. Student loan interest deductions, it says H&R Block only gives you that on the free version, but again, you'll want to verify that. Earned income tax credit, that's something that, it's a tax credit that the government will give certain people at different income levels. Child tax credit and interest income. Based on this information, it's saying H&R Block, or it appears that H&R Block actually gives you more of those in the free version than others. Let's dig into that a little bit more below. Pricing on the free tiers, it's basically for into a TurboTax, H&R Block, and TaxSlayer, it is free. TaxAct, something that I looked at a while ago, I've never actually used them because they didn't have the forms that I needed, does charge, at least as of the author of this article on thecollegeinvestor.com's writing in 2025. It charges for state, but it does not charge for federal. It looks like any of these, again, if you have a basic tax return, if it is W-2 income, maybe a couple of minor things, then you can try the free version and it should run you right through. Something that I would absolutely recommend you do is most of these softwares do not charge you until you file. So it is worthwhile trying out a couple different ones. Once you get income in one of the programs, it's very easy to transfer that information just by going screen to screen and transferring it into another. I would highly recommend doing that because you will see differences in the interview process that can make a significant difference. In the paid versions, I'm usually in the self-employed version that allows for a lot of different things. If you watch our videos, we do some of the, we definitely are in the stock market. We're definitely into a rental property or two. And we have other income that comes in from various different sources. So we've had a chance to run all of these through the ringers. The paid versions, in my experience, walking through here, H&R Block I used for a number of years, probably 7, 8 years. And it was great until the last few years. What I've noticed with H&R Block is the interview process is great. They allow automatically importing from multiple different financial institutions for both stock trades, for donations, and for banking, for getting your 1099s. It was a great software. And I probably misspoke there on the charitable contributions. That does not automatically come in. But it was a great software where it would do everything I needed it to do. I would actually purchase the software in advance, run all my information through so it was resident on my own personal computer. I didn't have to worry about it being in the cloud somewhere or being accessed by people who shouldn't have access to it. That was my go-to software. I had tried H&R, or I had tried TurboTax up to that point, and the TurboTax interview always led to worse results, and I was never able to go in and back test why those results were worse. It had something to do with the way that data was entered. So H&R Block was my go-to until, again, like I mentioned, the last few years. What happened was there was always some little boutique form that H&R Block did not offer. There was no workaround, and I'd always get a flag that said, oh, shoot, you have to go in and take it into our staff. The first year that happened, H&R Block actually stepped up and said, we'll pay for it. Don't worry about it. We'll cover it. And they had a person do it. It was great. The person on the inside actually didn't seem to know the software as well as they should have, because we had to walk them through a few different portions of the taxes to correct it so we weren't filing erroneous returns. But they did it. They stepped up. Now, the next 2 years after that, I reached out to H&R Block because, again, I did not expect them to be missing very basic forms that were used by a number of people. In this particular case, it was a disaster recovery form for an IRA distribution, so you didn't have to pay the IRA penalty. And H&R Block just didn't include this form for whatever reason. That was a train wreck. So I had to I had to search through a bunch of different programs, and that's how I actually stumbled onto TaxSlayer. The name turned me off, honestly. TaxSlayer seemed like something that maybe a elementary or middle school kid would have liked, but the program itself was very robust. It's had the forms that I needed, and I don't believe that, actually I know that TurboTax didn't have the form at that time. TaxSlayer did. So rather than take my taxes in and pay someone $2,000 to do the taxes, I was able to do it through the program. It looked like everything was accurately populated and accurately presented, and I was able to get my taxes done for, I want to say, less than $200 in each case. So H&R Block, when I reached out to them, they essentially said, sorry, it's not a problem that we're willing to address anymore. You'll have to take it into our software. So that happened for a couple of years. I've sworn off H&R Block. And then I decided to try them again this last year. With the software, again, it was very good. The interview process was smooth. It was quick. It went through. I actually really liked it, imported any of the stock trades that I had made. And then I got to the end, and they were missing a different form this time. The form in this particular case is an 8881. Not that means anything to most people. The only reason I know it is because I had to research it and find out why it was not giving me a credit for a 401k program that we set up for a self-employed entity that was entitled to it. H&R Block didn't even offer it, but they gave me a tip that I could pay someone at their local office who would be able to do it then. It did not exist in their software. Their self-employed, the highest end self-employed downloadable software they offer. It is not available in the online format, but there is a tool tip that says you can go in and pay someone to do your taxes for you in their local office. Again, TaxSlayer had the form, was not a question. So my experience with these different softwares is H&R Block seems to have gone to a model that for the basic tax returns, they're fine. They're in fact probably the best interview program that I have seen out there. Unfortunately, they don't cover little nuances. They push people to the office in almost what appears to be an effort to generate additional revenue. That's just my experience. Yours may be different. So what I have found is TurboTax, the interview process, it seems to be asking questions in a way that just doesn't quite flow for me, and I don't end up getting as good of a return. The math is the same behind the scenes, but you would have to back test and figure out what the difference in the interview process is that is giving a worse return. All of the math seems to track. In my other taxes, I'll go through and verify, make sure things are not being entered wrong, but for whatever reason, TurboTax seems to give a lower result. So this is why I'm saying you should test a few for you. Now, what I have done is I've gone through, and the interview process, again, H&R Block was great. When I went through the TaxSlayer process this year, the interview was actually giving a worse result. So I did have to go in because they had the form that I needed. I had to back test it and figure out what was going on. And what I found was on some depreciable assets, they were actually depreciating it over a much longer time period than they were supposed to. Once I was able to track that, I was able to go in and compare and figure out that in this particular case, it was residential rental property. And again, H&R Block had it right. TaxSlayer, for some reason, was depreciating it more as a commercial property over a much longer period of time. Once we corrected that, the numbers matched. So based on my experience, H&R Block is good if you have a less complicated scenario. TaxSlayer seems to be able to handle, based on their software and their internal processes, more complicated tax returns. However, the interview process is not as good as H&R Block, and you may have to back test some of the numbers that they give you. TurboTax just does not seem to flow quite as well as the other two programs that I've used, for whatever reason. Something else to look at when you're going through the tax process is the audit support. All three of the ones that I've referenced, the TurboTax, H&R Block, and TaxSlayer, provide audit support. I have had the unfortunate experience to go through the audit process, and honestly, as long as the numbers are accurate and the details are accurate, it wasn't that bad. We were able to verify the numbers, go through the details, and say, this is what we calculated. The IRS came back and said, well, here's what we think you need to calculate, and it was a pretty simple issue to resolve. In fact, we actually ended up getting back a little more money because we weren't taking off some of the write-offs that we needed to, and the IRS told us that they were going to, in a recapture scenario, recapture the money whether we wrote it off or not, so we might as well write it off. So TurboTax does offer a few different ways to do this. They have an audit support guarantee, which gives you free one-on-one guidance, consultation with a trained tax professional, and you can actually call them for support. That's kind of a big deal. There is an optional add-on that you can add in there for audit defense, which is a stepped-up layer. And this has you're able to get full audit representation by a licensed tax professional who goes to the audit for you and is able to represent you in front of the IRS. When we went through our audit, this was something that we opted to do, and it was very critical because the tax professional that is able to go and do that knows what the IRS is looking for. They can bring the documentation specific for that audit request, and they're able to avoid getting questioned about other audit items. For example, they can say, that's not outside the scope of what we're representing here. I don't have that information, and it's pretty much done at that point. Whereas if you represent yourself to the IRS and you present information that maybe triggers a question about something else, the IRS can then go into other portions of your tax return and request a whole bunch of different information. So something like an audit defense can be very helpful. Some of these instances allow you to do an add-on service that you purchase when you do your taxes as opposed to after you do your taxes. In our particular case, it was H&R Block that we were able to go through, and we were using their standard free audit defense. And in that instance, we had to purchase the audit protection separately. H&R Block does not provide a lot of information on what it is that they provide as part of their audit defense. They give you an analysis, implementation, and follow-up. In my experience, it's very similar to what TurboTax represents. You go into the office, you sit down, they go through all the tax documentation, verify your numbers, verify your inputs, and as long as everything is accurate and you have the documentation, remember that's critical with this, you have the documentation to back up your write-offs, all of your deductions, all of your claims. This is not innocent until proven guilty. It is guilty until proven innocent when you're going through a tax audit. But again, very similar. And in our case, we were able to pay extra. It was a few $100s extra for that audit defense and have someone go represent us. TaxSlayer does very similar. They have an audit support. If you get something, you're able to contact them either via mail, email, or fax. There is no phone number that you're able to call if you have that and set up an appointment, but you're able to email them and they'll get back to you and go through it. They also have an add-on, and I want to say it's something like $40 extra that you can purchase at the time of filing your taxes, where they will do the same representation, walk you through it with a professional, and they say they will spend up to $1 million defending you. I'm not sure exactly how that works and hope I don't find out through an audit. But anyway, in my experience, going back to the three different instances, TurboTax, H&R Block, and TaxSlayer. I'm sticking with TaxSlayer. They seem to have the forums, they seem to have the depth of the software that I need. They're able to go into little nuances without me having to take it in and pay someone or get told at the end of the process, we're sorry, we can't help you. It's just been a much smoother process going through TaxSlayer the last 2 years than H&R Block. I really do hope H&R Block gets their act together or my taxes simplified so that I can use the interview software, because it is the interview process is actually better in my opinion on H&R Block. But due to outcomes, TaxSlayer has been my go-to for the last 2 years, and they're who I will go to the next years to come. I hope this is helpful to you. If it is, give us a like down below. If you'd like to see more content like this, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone who may benefit from this video, please do share. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.